In the summer of 1987, a 12-year-old boy named Kenji traveled with his family to the rural town of Yufuin in Oita Prefecture, a place known for its hot springs and dense bamboo forests. His family had rented a small guest house beside a koi pond from an elderly woman named Fumiko-san, who lived alone and spoke very little, communicating mostly through nods and the occasional thin smile. The first evening, Kenji wandered to the edge of the pond after dinner. The water was dark and perfectly still. He crouched at the bank and stared into it, watching the pale shapes of the koi drift through the black beneath him. Then he heard it. Mite, mite, mite. Look, look, look. It came from beneath the surface, not bubbling up through water, but clear and dry, like a voice spoken from the other side of a wall. Kenji stumbled backward and ran inside. He told his mother, who laughed softly, and told him it was frogs. That night, Fumiko-san came to his room. She did not knock. She simply stood in the doorway, holding a small cloth bundle tied with red cord. She placed it at the foot of his futon without a word, pointed at it firmly, then pointed at him, then placed 2 fingers over her lips. Kenji understood. Say nothing and keep it close. In the morning, he asked his father about the pond. His father shrugged. Pretty thing, he said. The old woman must have spent years on it. But that afternoon, while his parents napped, Kenji returned to the pond and found Fumiko-san kneeling at the bank. She was pressing her palms flat against the surface of the water, not into the water, against it, as though the surface were a pane of glass, and something on the other side was pressing back. Kenji could see the faint impressions of fingers pushing up from below, long and thin, and far too many. He ran. That evening at dinner, Fumiko-san was composed and quiet as always, refilling their cups without being asked. But Kenji noticed her hands. The fingertips were faintly blue, as though bruised from cold. After dinner, she pulled him aside and spoke to him for the first time properly. Her voice was low and very even. She has been here since before this house, she said, since before the pond. We put the pond on top of her so she would stay beneath the water and not walk on the land. Every summer, someone hears her voice. Every summer, I must go and remind her to stay down. Kenji asked what happened to the people who heard her. Fumiko-san was quiet for a long moment. Nothing, she said, as long as they do not look into the water after dark and do not answer her when she calls. She glanced at his hands then, looking for the cloth bundle. Kenji realized. He pulled it from his pocket, and she exhaled slowly with relief. Good boy, she said, and said nothing more. His parents slept soundly that last night. Kenji lay awake holding the bundle to his chest, listening to the absolute silence of the countryside. Just before dawn, he heard it again, faint and patient and horribly close, as though the voice had found some way up through the soil beneath the guest house floor. Mite, mite, mite. He did not look. He closed his eyes and kept them closed until he heard his mother moving in the next room, and light filled the gap beneath the door. His family left that morning. In the car, his father commented cheerfully about what a lovely woman Fumiko-san was and what an exceptional property she kept. Kenji said nothing and watched Yufuin disappear behind the mounting curves. He kept the cloth bundle. He keeps it still. Last spring, Kenji's daughter came into his study to show him a video she had taken on a school trip to Oita Prefecture. Hot springs, bamboo forests, a beautiful old guest house beside a koi pond. Isn't it lovely, Papa? She said. In the background of the video, barely visible at the edge of the frame, a woman knelt at the bank of the pond with her palms pressed flat against the water.
Kenji watched the video for a long time without speaking. Then he opened his desk drawer, took out the cloth bundle, and placed it very carefully in his daughter's bag without telling her why.
At the northwestern base of Mount Fuji, where the ancient lava fields swallowed the roots of 10,000 trees, there exists a road that no map will show you. The locals call it Kagami-dori, Mirror Road, though they will not say this name out loud after sunset. The road appears only in autumn when the mist rolls down from Fuji's slopes and settles between the twisted trunks of Aokigahara Forest. Drivers sometimes find themselves upon it without understanding how they arrived. The asphalt is perfectly smooth, the trees press close on either side, and every 100 meters, bolted to the bark of a dead hinoki cypress, hangs a mirror. Kenji Murakawa found the road in October of 2019. He was driving back to Tokyo after visiting his elderly mother in Fujiyoshida, tired and running late, when his navigation system flickered and died. The forest closed around him before he understood what was happening. His headlights caught the first mirror, and he slowed, confused by its presence in such a remote place. His own face looked back at him, pale in the yellow light. He drove on. The second mirror showed him something different. It still held his reflection, same coat, same thinning hair, same tired eyes, but the reflection was not moving with him. It stood perfectly still, watching as Kenji's car crept slowly past. He told himself it was a trick of the angle. He pressed the accelerator. The third mirror showed the reflection smiling. Kenji had not smiled since his mother's house. He stopped the car completely now, hands trembling on the wheel, engine idling in the heavy silence of the forest. Aokigahara is famous for its silence. The density of the iron-rich volcanic rock beneath the soil disrupts compasses, swallows sound, absorbs everything. No bird song, no wind, nothing. Then, from somewhere behind him, he heard footsteps on the asphalt. Slow, deliberate, growing closer. He did not look in his rearview mirror. He told himself he would not look. Every instinct, every old warning his grandmother had pressed into him as a child, screamed at him to keep his eyes forward. In Japanese folklore, mirrors are sacred objects, kagami, among the 3 imperial treasures of the nation. They capture souls. They reveal what the naked eye refuses to see. And in certain places, in places where the boundary between this world and the next has worn dangerously thin, they show you the dead. The footsteps stopped directly behind the car. Kenji felt the vehicle sink slightly, as though something of great weight had settled onto the rear bumper. The temperature inside the car dropped so suddenly that his breath became visible, small clouds dissolving in the frozen air. The radio, which had been silent since his navigation failed, turned on by itself and produced a single sustained tone, high and unwavering, like a funeral bell stretched into infinity. His rearview mirror filled with white. He screamed, wrenched the wheel left, and drove the car directly into the tree line. The front right tire burst against a root. The engine stalled. Darkness swallowed everything except the distant, impossible rectangle of his rearview mirror, still glowing faintly white in the blackness. He sat there until dawn, eyes fixed forward, never once turning around. In the pale gray morning, he found his way back to the main road. The hidden road was gone. The mirrors were gone. There was nothing behind him but ancient trees and volcanic rock and silence. He never spoke of it publicly, but his younger sister later described how he changed in the weeks following that October night. He removed every mirror from his apartment,
He covered the reflective surfaces of his windows with newspaper. He stopped meeting people's eyes, she said, because he was terrified of catching his own reflection in theirs. In January, Kenji Murakawa disappeared. His car was found at the edge of Aokigata, engine cold, door open. On the dashboard, his phone displayed a photograph he had apparently taken just before leaving the vehicle. It showed the dark tree line ahead of him, and in the rear-view mirror, clearly visible, a figure standing in the back seat, smiling.
The summer Keiko turned 12 was the summer her family moved into the old Yamashiro estate in rural Nagano. The house had been empty for 40 years. The locals knew why, they just never said it out loud. Keiko discovered the well on her third day there, hidden behind the overgrown garden wall, sealed with heavy stones and thick rope tied in knots she didn't recognize. Her younger brother Daichi immediately leaned over it, the way boys do. "Don't," she said. She didn't know why, she just knew. That night, Keiko awoke at exactly 3 a.m. The house was silent, except for a sound rising from somewhere below. A soft, rhythmic dripping, water on stone, slow and patient, like something counting. She told herself the pipes were old. By the fourth night, Daichi had stopped eating. He sat at the window facing the garden, his eyes fixed on the well. When their mother asked what he was looking at, he smiled and said, "She's teaching me her name." Their mother laughed nervously. Keiko did not laugh. She went to the village the next morning and found an elderly woman named Mrs. Goto running a small shrine goods shop. When Keiko described the well and the rope, Mrs. Goto's face went the color of ash. The Yamashiro family sealed something in that well in 1952, she said, not looking up from her counter. A woman who drowned herself after her children were taken by illness. But she didn't stay drowned. She came back up. Only she wasn't a woman anymore. What was she? Mrs. Goto finally looked at her. Hungry. She pressed a strip of paper into Keiko's hand, an ofuda, a ward, and told her to place it on the well before sunset. She told her not to speak to whatever she heard. She told her not to look into the water, no matter what she saw reflected there. And your brother, Mrs. Goto added quietly. How long has he been listening to her? Keiko ran home. Daichi was gone. She found his small muddy footprints leading straight to the garden. The stones had been moved. The rope was on the ground, each knot untied with impossible neatness. The well was open. Daichi stood at its edge, staring down, perfectly still. Daichi, she kept her voice even, calm, the way you speak to someone sleepwalking. Come away from there. She wants to show me something, he said dreamily. Daichi, look at me. He turned. His eyes were wrong, not dark or glowing like in stories, just absent, like a house with all the lights off. Keiko crossed the garden slowly, the ofuda pressed against her palm. She could hear it now, the dripping sound rising from the well, but it had a rhythm. It sounded almost like syllables, almost like a name being said over and over. She grabbed her brother's wrist and pulled him back hard, slapping the ofuda flat against the stone rim of the well. The dripping stopped. The silence that followed was total and absolute. Then, from deep inside the well, so far down it barely reached her, a sound, not a scream, not a chant, a child's laugh, and then another, and another, a whole chorus of small voices laughing together, the sound echoing up from somewhere that couldn't possibly exist at the bottom of a garden well. Daichi blinked. His eyes came back slowly like lights warming up. He looked at Keiko. He looked at the well. He started to cry without knowing why. Keiko held him and did not look down. The laughter faded. The dripping never started again. But some nights, when the house was quiet, Keiko would awake at exactly 3 a.m.,
and lie perfectly still with her eyes open, listening to the silence below, and wondering whether the silence meant it was gone or whether it had simply learned to wait without a sound. She never found out which. Her family moved out before autumn. The well was never sealed again. Nobody wanted to go near it. It's still there.
Kenji had been living alone in Osaka apartment for 8 months when he finally caved and got a pet. Not a cat, not a dog. The shelter was full, and he'd come home a little drunk and found a rabbit on Craigslist. The post just said, "Free, good boy, eats anything." The rabbit was fat and gray and had eyes the color of old coins. He named it Mochi. His coworker Yuki thought it was hilarious. "A rabbit," she said, eating her convenience store onigiri across from him. "That's your cure for loneliness." He listens. "It's a rabbit, Kenji." He listens well. That night, Kenji set Mochi on the couch and turned on the TV. The rabbit sat perfectly still, watching the screen. Not the way animals usually do, confused, tracking movement. It watched the way a person watches, following the story. Kenji told himself it was cute. By the third week, things were a little off. Food went missing. Not rabbit food, his food. Half a container of leftover katsu, a banana, 3 pieces of bread. He figured he was stress eating and forgetting. Then he came home one evening and Mochi was sitting at the kitchen table, on a chair, upright, little gray paws folded on the surface. Kenji stood in the doorway for a long time. The rabbit looked at him, then it looked at the empty chair across from it. Kenji sat down. They stayed like that for 20 minutes. Kenji didn't know what else to do. He called Yuki. "I think something is wrong with my rabbit." "Is it sick?" "No, it's polite." Silence. "Kenji, I'm not joking. What does your grandmother say about rabbits?" "She never mentioned rabbits." "What about tanuki?" Kenji's stomach dropped a little. His grandmother had mentioned tanuki, shapeshifters, tricksters, old spirits that wore animal skins and lived on the edge of human spaces, forests, riverbanks, the places where city met wild. They didn't mean harm exactly, but they got hungry and lonely, and they were very, very good at pretending to be something they weren't. "You think my rabbit is a tanuki?" "I think," Yuki said carefully, "that you adopted a rabbit from a stranger on the internet at 2 in the morning and you didn't ask any questions. The post said, eats anything." "Okay," Kenji said, "what do I do?" "Tanuki respect directness. They're tricksters, but they don't like being tricked back. Go home, look it in the eye, and tell it you know what it is. Then tell it it's welcome to stay if it wants, but it has to be honest with you." "You want me to negotiate with my rabbit?" "You're tanuki, Kenji." He went back to the kitchen. Mochi was still at the table. The old coin eyes caught the light. Kenji sat down again. He folded his hands the same way the rabbit had folded its paws. "I know what you are, and I don't mind, but if you're going to eat my katsu, the least you can do is tell me." The rabbit stared at him. Then, slowly, in a way that was somehow not horrifying, but just deeply strange, it shifted, grew. The fur didn't disappear so much as settle into the shape of a very short, very stocky man in an old brown jacket with round cheeks and the same coin-colored eyes. He put a hand on the table. "The katsu was a little dry," he said. His voice was like someone rolling gravel around in a jar. "I know, I overcooked it." A pause. "The bread was good. It's from the place near the station." The tanuki nodded, seemingly satisfied. "I can pay rent. I'm good at finding lost things, and I keep the mice away." Kenji thought about 8 months of empty apartment. He thought about Mochi sitting perfectly still, watching TV like he was following the story. "Do you actually like TV?" Kenji asked. The tanuki tilted his head. "The cooking shows," he admitted. "I have opinions on dashi." "Okay," Kenji said, and that was that. Yuki thought the whole thing was still hilarious. She came over for dinner the following Saturday, and the tanuki made a broth that made her put her chopsticks down and go quiet for a moment.
"Okay," she said finally, "you can stay." The tanuki looked pleased in the way that old round-cheeked things look pleased, not smiling exactly, just settled. The apartment felt less empty after that. Though Kenji did start hiding his leftover katsu, some things were sacred.